I feel concerned about the safety of this space for me to speak out. I believe the misrepresentation of the facts and data and information and timeline is really harmful. I am disappointed to hear the county auditor expressing that we weren't communicative and that we were not responding to her requests. And I have concerns about the misrepresentation of our agency's ability to provide $25 million of rental assistance to the community in the last year. You have received all the information, you have our financial statements, you have our canceled checks, you have every single client file, you have every single document that we provided, every fiscal document we provided. So I'm just concerned and confused as to why it would continue to be a narrative that we're not complying. And so I just need to be able to show up here and say, that is really hard to hear and it's very harmful to me.
Some of the things that Mary Hall said today are inaccurate. She said there was fraud. I have not heard nor seen any evidence that there was actual fraud.
Once there's fraud discovered and then we're told, well, no, we're not going to get that information for you. It was almost like go to court and get a subpoena to obtain that information. I think it's going to take a change in management at CAC.
Unexamined biases about Kirsten personally as a woman of color leading in our community through a pandemic might have gotten in the way. There might be biases at play and Kirsten may be personally being targeted.
The comment that was made by Megan Sullivan and about biases from the board, I find your comment really harmful and damaging, Megan. Not only to me, but also as well to staff. As a woman of color in leadership, currently the only woman of color in the whole state to be serving in a commission across the state, it is extremely damaging to bring that up because that's not the case. Good morning. You're tuning into the Board of County Commissioners board work session. This will be an executive session. It is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. It is 11:06 a.m. I am Carolina Mejia, chair of the board. Commissioner Ty Menser is excused for this week. I am joined by Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Ramiro Chavez in the boardroom, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell via Zoom, as well as other staff members who are joining us here today. The executive session we are in today is to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, community action councils, and commissioners' action may follow. With that, we will be in here for an hour. So with that, we'll go into an executive session. Thank you.
Let me close the video feed.
And we are back from executive session. It is 12:11 p.m. and we were in executive session to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, community action council. And with this, I'll hand it over to our county manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have proposed language for a motion for you to consider, if I may. Commissioner Edwards, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
My suggestion will be for, as a suggested action, move to authorize the county manager to exercise the suspension clause of the contracts between Thurston County and the Community Action Council, effective immediately and until further notice.
I'll second. Is that good, Ramiro? Or Elizabeth, does that cover?
Okay, Madam Chair.
Okay, sir, I'm ready.
I would move to authorize the county manager to exercise the suspension clause of the contracts with the Community Action Council per section 18 of the contract for cause. And this would take place immediately and until further notice by the County Board of Commissioners.
I will second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Mejia,
Aye.
Commissioner Messer is excused. Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, and I believe there will be a follow-up executive session for this matter. And with that, it is 12:18. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, so much.
thank you.
Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, April 28th, 2022. It is 12:01 p.m. set to go until 1 p.m. Today, we will be discussing nonprofit community and rent assistance, and this is an informational session.
We passed through, millions of dollars, almost $30 million. And we are also liable to the state auditor and commerce. And I think what happened was there was a big communication breakdown because we literally got no cooperation. I reached out to the CEO and the board asking to meet and got a nasty gram back, a nasty letter saying, please communicate directly with Kirsten York. So I did. And there was no cooperation. And we reached out to Commerce as well as the state auditor, and they sent us back to CFR 200 and the remedies in CFR 200. The one that fit the situation best was to suspend the contract. Just when the state auditor comes in and audits us, they give us recommendations, we take them because they're best practices and they know this work very, very well, like the back of our hands. Now, in turn, when we pass through money to subrecipients, when we go in and we find things that need to be tightened up to help prevent fraud. There's always going to be fraud, but you tighten it up as much as you can. We expect cooperation. And, in our defense, and you weren't sitting in our shoes, there was no communication. We really want to have a relationship with CAC, but they need to have a conversation with us. And that still has not happened yet. The first time I reached out was in February. We're almost to May. This is a lot of money and we could potentially be financially liable. And there was fraud. So we're still doing our investigation. And the state auditor is also going to audit this program. So when the state auditor audits programs, we do go in ahead of time to just make sure, okay, are things tight? And they were reasonable recommendations. We didn't want them to put any more burden on the people who were receiving the money, except for the landlords. And it looks like that's where the fraud was. I don't have the letters in front of me because I actually would have loved to have read some of them to you. We requested meetings through a couple of doodle polls and we never heard back. We tried to reach out and, I can't change your mind. So I don't really know what to say unless you want to request all the documents. We're happy to turn them over. We still need to meet because we still need a resolution to this if we're going to rebuild this relationship. You have to keep in mind what our role is, what my office's role is. It's to protect public funds. And we gave them recommendations, asked them for a response to each one. And we got a long letter telling us to put it in policy. And that's, if I ever did that to the state auditor, it would be pretty interesting and not in a good way. The first thing to help move this forward would be to respond to the report in writing as the internal auditor requested. And we still have not received the canceled checks, which we asked for. And you don't know if somebody, was there a check written, who cashed that check, because they're not necessarily the same person, or they could be different. So we're still waiting for that piece of information, which I know the state auditors will want to have also. CAC is a great organization and supports a lot of things. We all want the same thing, but I have a job to do, you have a job to do. So let's cooperate and make sure that we feel you are protecting public funds.
The use of the county auditor on the audit for CAC didn't necessarily follow standard practices as I have seen them in this community. And it also didn't really honor that partnership of collaboration and communication that we were having on a weekly basis with the county already on working through challenges. We all have that relationship in place. We built trust, we built common interests in like being successful together and working through challenges together. I don't believe that CAC would have received the same response to their letter from an audit if it would have been done by Tom and team, because there was already a partnership in place to have that dialogue and conversations. I think the lack of a relationship helped to cause some of the reaction to what letter was sent back to them. I think that how this was publicly put out there and the communication around that public information was harmful. I've not seen anything like that in my 30 years of nonprofit leadership, and where an organization's audit is kind of put out to the community. I think that's a direct consequence, not only to a nonprofit organization, but I also feel like there's indirect consequences in doing something like that. Other direct consequence to this is I think now that the county is viewing this nonprofit organization, which I feel like could happen to any of us, as a high-risk organization. Contracts that they had coming to them are not being given to them. That's impacted other projects. Again, going back to the drivers of the county auditor, if they would have looked at that response and said, like, I'm going to give that person a call, work with them, find out what's going on, they would have come to a resolution there on what the next steps were and what action steps CAC was going to take. I don't think we'd be in the same position of seeing that this is like such a high risk organization. I think overall the net impact to the community on hurting a nonprofit organization or organization like CAC is much larger than the audit findings that were within that audit and the potential of a few cases of fraud, which is really a challenge with this program. This was a fraud against CAC. So it wasn't something that they endorsed or they tried to do. This was a fraud against them, potentially. I'm just hoping that this isn't going to be a consistent practice moving forward from the county and how they work with nonprofits, because it has been a collaborative partnership to date. This kind of thing worries me, that this is like, if you disagree, if you don't like your audit results, if you speak up about something, you could be approached in this kind of way and essentially have your organization pulled out from under you and your local funding sources.
Derek mentioned that the use of the county auditor in this context was did not follow practices that he's familiar with. And I'm just wondering, was it unusual or inappropriate for your office to be involved in this way?
No, absolutely not. In fact, it's in the contract twice in 2 sections.
I think to interpret Mary Hall's interpretation of an ask from a board member to speak directly to the CEO as a nastygram is a pretty problematic interpretation.
There was a lot more to the letter than that.
Mary, hold on. Go ahead, Megan.
I just think that's a problematic interpretation and may have contributed to the breakdown in communication. So my question is, given the information being provided to you all as Board of Commissioners, we believe I believe is inaccurate and devastating and frightening decisions have been made based on some misinterpretation. How might we restore confidence in CAC and constituent community and ensure you are receiving complete and accurate information in order to make your best and fully informed decisions on behalf of the vulnerable clients that CAC serves?
I believe within the question that I gather is perhaps the Board of County Commissioners have received erroneous information and misleading information. So I will have the board members to respond to that question directly.
Have not been provided any inaccurate information by our staff. Our staff have been really clear through. I stand by all of the decisions that I've taken in regards to Community Action Council. I really stand by the information that I've been provided so far. For me, there's no trust on either side. So Community Action Council says they don't trust us. And honestly, from my standpoint, I don't trust them. And I don't trust them with future contracts right now.
I haven't seen any evidence I've gotten inaccurate information. I feel like there's been problems with communication and interpretation of written communication. At no point did I feel like I was given any inaccurate information by my staff.
It wasn't information that we received, it was a lack of information that we received. So we might not have had the total picture, but that wasn't anybody at the county level's fault. We asked for that information and didn't get it. Once there's fraud discovered and then we're told, well, no, we're not going to get that information for you. It was almost like go to court and get a subpoena to obtain that information. I think it's going to take a change in management at CAC to build that trust that is eventually going to be needed. We didn't like the idea that we had to cut this funding off and disrupt everyone and go find other processes to carry out the mission, if you will. But it was definitely something that needed to be done. It was that decision was forced upon us by the response from CAC. So if it sounds like I'm a little frustrated with this whole thing, it's exactly right. I am very frustrated. To get to a solution, we still haven't got all the information we've been asking for. I don't know how long it took to get the deposit back or what was left of it, but it took well over a month. I can't even understand it yet today. I think it was maybe 6 weeks. I don't get it. I do not get, and Mary has asked for contact. She hasn't had any contact yet. And being told that you can only communicate with the executive director of the organization when a board actually oversees that. To me, the executive director works for the board. So I was quite disheartened about the whole thing, and I'm hoping we can get there too. But I don't see us getting there until we fix the problem. Now the problem has exasperated itself to the point we need to do a much larger audit than what would have originally been necessary. I'd like to ask Mary Hall if, in fact, we've got all the information that we've asked for.
We need the fronts and the backs of the checks because we need to see who endorsed them. So that's what I'm talking about when I say cancel checks. And the bank should have all of those electronically. You know, and I'm very disappointed with this meeting. Just want to share from my perspective, because number one, I give money to a lot of you. And we all want the same thing. We all want to help people in the community. And, you know, we were putting together a little presentation to talk about this is why and how we audit, that we are going to invite you all to. I hope you'll still come. I think it's not going to serve anybody well if you think that we're the enemy or the bad guy, or that we maliciously set out to hurt CAC, because there's nothing further from the truth. This is the first time I've seen Kirsten York, and this is the first conversation I've had with her also. And that's not without trying.
Some of the things that Mary Hall said today are inaccurate. And so if you haven't heard to this point that you've received inaccurate information, I'm hoping you can hear that today. And there are at least three points of what she said. She said there was fraud. I have not heard nor seen any evidence that there was actual fraud. She said there was no communication. There has been abundance of communication from Kirsten and Community Action Council. And she said there was no cooperation. That is absolutely untrue. So I think that decisions have been made based on a subjective reaction, and some of that reaction we're seeing here today. And if staff are giving similar information, it is inaccurate. And I think it's really important to be aware of that, because it has caused significant harm to clients in our community to the agency, to our programs. And it is absolutely a travesty and heartbreaking to see this played out this way and continuing into this meeting itself.
A statement Commissioner Edwards made about what it would take to, restore good working relations between the county and CAC would be a change in executive leadership. And I guess the question that I have about that is sort of rhetorical, and it's an invitation and request for all involved on the county end to consider where unexamined biases about Kirsten personally as a woman of color leading in our community through a pandemic might have gotten in the way, and what work folks could do to examine what potentially are unexamined biases, because what it could look like to the community and what it looks like to me is that there was a lot of weight put on what Kirsten said and how she said it when she asked for clarification and guidance about conflicting information. And Derek alluded to this, that he's not seen things be handled in that particular way. And based on the collaborative nature of the relationship historically, that seemed disproportionate and pretty concerning. So my invitation or request is for folks to look at how there might be biases at play, and Kirsten may be personally being targeted when Kirsten was just seeking clarification.
I would like to address the comment that was made by Megan Sullivan and about biases from the board. I find your comment really harmful and damaging, Megan. Not only to me, but also as well to staff. As a woman of color in leadership, currently the only woman of color in the whole state to be serving in a commission across the state, it is extremely damaging to bring that up, because that's not the case. We never wanted to get to this point where we are. I can honestly say that we were wanting a solution out of this. But there has been a breakdown in communication. For me, it's been very harmful to see staff being thrown under the bus over and over again. And it's been extremely frustrating.
I feel concerned about the safety of this space for me to speak out. And I'm going to do my very best to speak honestly and say, I believe the misrepresentation of the facts and data and information and timeline is really harmful to our organization, who has provided services in this community for over 50 years. We are also independently audited on a regular basis annually by an outside independent auditor, of which our organization has received upstanding audits, findings, and responses for over 30 years. We are monitored by the federal government, the state government, local providers, counties across our 3-county area, and have always collaborated in conversation and discussion about how to move forward with best practices to get the funding out to the most vulnerable clients in our community and to serve them with integrity and ethics and equity. I am disappointed to hear the county auditor expressing that we weren't communicative and that we were not responding to her requests. I would highly recommend that you consider reviewing the information that we've put out that has accurately depicted the letters and emails that we've received as an organization. We followed the process put out in our contract in order to discuss our concerns about the suspension. Requests for meetings came after our suspension, and I want to be really clear that at that point we had been suspended. The press release had gone out to the public, which, regardless of intent, the impact was harmful to our community members and to our organization. I understand the press release went to every auditor in the entire state, and I know that our partners around the state are concerned that this would be the example of how a funder and a provider can work together and have issues not be resolved through monitoring processes. So there was concern about transparency, communication. I have requested meetings with the commissioners. I've requested meetings with Mary Hall. As you know, we have a meeting on the books on May 19th. So I'm happy to have those discussions with those who can attend. And I have concerns about the misrepresentation of our agency's ability to provide $25 million of rental assistance to the community in the last year. And that in August, when we were presented the opportunity to collaborate with a for-profit vendor, we were top 3 in the state. And so my concerns are, how do we get the funding out to the clients in a way that's equitable and ethical, following the policies that are set by our funders? And I believe, as Derek has said, we had a collaborative working relationship to identify how we move forward on a weekly basis. And that was ultimately going really well. So I'm saddened to see the impact of this. And I am saddened to also learn that the commissioners have concerns about our ability to provide services in the future to this community. Our HEN and CHG contracts are up for renewal, and I understand you'll be discussing that. Ultimately, I hope that you provide that funding to providers who can get the funding to the clients that deserve it and are eligible for it, and that the harm done in the transition time through this has been highly impactful. We are open to having discussions about how to repair our relationships with the county, and hope that you can come to that place yourselves. And I just appreciate our team who has weathered a pandemic and served thousands and thousands of clients. You have received all the information. You have our financial statements. You have our canceled checks. You have every single client file. You have every single document that we provided, every fiscal document we provided. So I'm just concerned and confused as to why it would continue to be a narrative that we're not complying. And so I just need to be able to show up here and say that is really hard to hear, and it's very harmful to me, and it's harmful to our team, and it's harmful to our community.